Hello! It has been another month, and that means it is time for a reading wrap-up for May, because it is now June. Somehow. I'm not entirely sure how it's June, because it feels like it should probably be September 2016, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't feel like June 2017 to me. I didn't do as much reading in May as I hoped I would, and as much as I thought I would. I read 4 books in May. 4. And, well, one kind of doesn't feel like I read a book because it's a lot shorter, but let's just get into it. The first book I read this year was in hardback, and that was The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan. And I did the world's worst book talk, and I will link that down below, which has all of my thoughts on this book, but I gave it 5 stars. I greatly enjoyed it. I feel like Rick Riordan is one of those writers that with each series he gets better and better. It is the second Trials of Apollo book, following The Hidden Oracle, which came out last year. This came out on May 2nd this year, and I got to buy it in my local grocery store on May 1st. The second book I read was sort of a continuation. I had left off. It's The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson, which I began in September of last year, as it so happens. And I had sort of left off on finishing it until now, because every time it came up in my holds at the library, I was just like, oh, I don't feel like reading that. And I gave it 4 stars. I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it necessarily. I don't know. I remember one of the first BookTube videos I ever read, like last year sometime. Someone had included it in Best Plot Twists, I think, and I would thoroughly disagree, but some people might think that the plot twist in it was a plot twist. I personally didn't. It's about a princess who runs away on her wedding day, and then there's these 2 guys. I've heard it described as not a love triangle, but personally, I would consider it a love triangle, so. I only read the last 30% of that book in May, because the first 70% I read in September of last year, so that feels like cheating, but I guess it isn't. The third book I read in May was Hotel Valhalla Guide to the Norse Worlds by Rick Riordan. It's sort of a little guide to some Norse stuff, is what I would call it. It doesn't really give any new information on the Norse stuff in the Magnus Chase books. It kind of has just mostly the details from the Magnus Chase books with a little bit of comedic stuff in between, so it wasn't actually great, but I gave it 5 stars anyway, because I love Magnus Chase, even though he does not appear in this particular novella. It's just a little thing, kinda, like a little guidebook. I read it. I read it in an hour at 2 a.m. after I finished The Kiss of Deception, so I gave that 5 stars, because why not? And then the 4th book I read in May was a bit of a struggle, and that was Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth, which I didn't have high expectations for in the first place, but then after I had started reading, I looked at the reviews on Goodreads, which don't ever do that if you've started reading a book already. Don't do that. Like, if you look before you read a book, or after you read a book, that's one thing, but don't read in the middle of reading the book, because it will, or at least not in the case of this book. I kind of regretted looking at those, because there's apparently some controversy about it, which I'll link my Goodreads review down below, because I don't really want to get into it here, but after reading that, it was kind of hard to keep reading it, because I felt bad because I did like it. I felt bad, like, as if I shouldn't like it. Have you ever had a book where you don't really want to like it, but then you do anyway? And I gave this book 4 stars. It's more of a 3.5, but I gave it 4 stars because I did enjoy it. But the thing is, I didn't want to enjoy it after I read those reviews. I felt bad for enjoying it, but I did enjoy it. It's not a great book. It's better than Divergent, which was Veronica Roth's big-name series, you know, the Divergent series. There's movies. I haven't seen the movies, and I haven't read Allegiant yet, but Divergent and Insurgent just aren't that great of books in general, but I feel like Veronica Roth's writing has improved, so that's something. The thing that actually bugged me the most in this book is it has 2 different point of views, but they're in different tenses, one of them is in third person limited, and the other one is in first person. And that kind of drove me nuts after a while. At first I was like, okay, I didn't really notice it much. But then I did start noticing it, and it started driving me crazy. So that is my biggest actual complaint from that book. It's not great or anything, but I thought it was good. So those are all the books that I finished in May. The book I'm reading right now is The Star-Touched Queen by Roshni Chosky. Wait, Chosky? Am I pronouncing that correctly? I probably am not. Anyway, but it's one of 2 books in a duology, I believe, and I haven't finished it yet. I'm only 16% in, but I'm enjoying it a lot. It's very different from a lot of fantasy books, which I really am glad about. Like, a lot of fantasy books kind of take place in similar worlds, but this one has a lot of Indian mythology, so that's very interesting to me. I find that very interesting and something different, because most fantasy stories do take place in, like, a fake Europe. So to see a place that's not fake Europe is super exciting, really, honestly. So, but hopefully I will be able to talk about that at the end of June. Beginning of April. No, beginning of July, when I do my June wrap-up. So, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time, hopefully before July. That would be good, wouldn't it? It would be good. I'm gonna go now.